here as always. Steve, the cricket guy's here, legend of the game, and legend of analysing the game, I should say. Not actually playing, but analysing.
Very kind of you. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm a legend of the game. Not in my offspin. But good to be here, Matt. Looking forward to talking about lots of great cricket this evening.
Good, and we've got another legend with us, Tony the Man. He's here.
I am the legend. He's only an imposter.
You're both gracing us with your presence, and we appreciate it. So there's been a hell of a lot going on. We'll obviously start at the top. Obviously, the biggest kind of news in world cricket and in the sport news with regard to cricket. Obviously, the World Test Championships. And then obviously you'll talk about many other things. But I'll steal your fire, Steve. I'll let you carry on and get straight into it. So over to you, Steve.
Cheers, Mac. Thank you very much. Yeah, great to be here. Always good to talk cricket. And there's been some brilliant cricket to talk about, Tony, this week. So let's start at the top. India, New Zealand World Test Championship final. Tony was right. I was wrong. New Zealand won the game. So tell me, Tony, what happened? How did you see that unfold? How did that happen?
I think it started before even the match, because I think that New Zealand's preparation with the two matches against England was better for them, and the conditions turned out to be similar to some of them, and it also helped them to decide and they went with the 4 pacemen. And India announced their team very early and announced 2 spinners. And of course, the conditions negated their spinners. And had they maybe good a player as he is, had they gone with just Ashwin and not Jadeja and put another pace bowler like Siraj or somebody like that in, I think it would have been closer than it was, because it was a deceptively close match. I think that what got New Zealand over the line was greater application in their batting. They really applied themselves in both innings, but especially in the first innings when Williamson was in for an eternity for his 49.
Yes.
I mean, he really was. It was, to go back years, it reminded me of the good old Essex player Trevor Bailey, who used to plod on forever. But I think
so that New Zealand top 3 in that first innings, Tony. Latham 30 in 104 balls, Conway 54 in 153 balls, and Williamson 49 in 177 balls.
Yes.
So you can see between them, what's that? 354. That's getting on for 450 balls there.
Yeah, but they got important runs. The other thing, and apart from application resolution, I think that got them through. The weather did them a favour, but I still think we'll go back to India in a little bit. But the other thing that came out of the match to me was that Kyle Jemison came of age, in my opinion, as a Test cricketer. He scored an important 20-odd. It was only 20-odd, but it was important runs at a crucial time. And he and then Southey scored 30-something in the first innings, and it produced a first innings score of presentable proportions. And then he took 5 for Jemison in the Indian first innings, bowling very well. He's a very tall man, and yet, to his credit, he pitched the ball right up. And I think that performance, and I'm sure that the New Zealanders as a whole, and Williamson in particular, was grateful. He has promised much. He has promised in the IPL, and I think that this World Test Championship was the making of him, and he's come of age.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Jameson was very good. I have to say, when the game started, I was worried for New Zealand, because in the same way that as we've just said, the New Zealand top 3 really applied themselves. Sharma and Gill looked in no trouble at all. I was going to say on the first morning, it was probably the second morning, third morning, whatever, but in the first morning of play. And I thought that the New Zealand attack was looking a bit samey, actually, in that period. Wagner wasn't really getting much going. Jameson, as you say, was pitching it up and was bowling in a way that's very similar to Southey and Bolt. And actually, in that opening salvo, Southey and Bolt bowled, if I may say, a little on the disappointing side to start the game. But then after lunch, once New Zealand, I think, settled down and settled into the game, they really had India kind of, I was going to say by the throat, not quite right. It was nip and tuck all the way through, but certainly then that seam attack did come into its own, and it did work. I was just looking at the scorecard across talking about the selections across the innings. There were 40 overs of spin bowled. I think 15 and 7 by Ashwin in the first innings, and then 10 and 8 in the next. So, what's 50 overs of spin? That's when you consider the pacemen were bowling 25 odd overs each in the first innings. That probably tells you that Kohli was not looking to turn to his spinners. He wasn't seeing the opportunities to do so. I guess as well in those conditions with a Duke ball as well.
He did, in my opinion, although it wasn't particularly a pitch for spinners, I thought he underbowled Ashwin in the first innings because he caused the left-handers quite a considerable amount of bother, and he bowled himself. He bowled very well, and undoubtedly is the second best off-spin bowler in the world now to Simon Harmer of Essex. To be serious, he bowled very well, but the pitch just wasn't for him. It wasn't his pitch. And as I say, but it does show you that if you get a pitch that's even slightly helpful to the spinners, India are a major force. Their spinners are not just spinners in India. They are spinners the world over, and I think Kohli played well in the first innings. Rahane played well in the first innings, but nobody else. And then in the second innings, only a Pant with his 41 featured at all. Really, New Zealand sensed victory, I think, on the last day, and India batted poorishly, not badly, but poorishly. And I felt they could have batted better, and they should have drawn the match, I think. But New Zealand managed to get on top.
Yeah, I felt in India's second innings again, everyone seemed to get out fairly regularly. It was either what was it? So Sharma batted for 81 balls, Gill for 33, Pujara for 80 balls, a thrilling 15 in 80 balls. He looked. I have to say, I wrote before the finals about the Indian side and felt that they were, had strength in every department. But if there was one player that I was beginning to wonder about keeping his place in the side, it was Pujara, whose form was coming out of the World Test Championship was nowhere. And I do wonder if India might now begin to think about Rahane batting at 3 and bring in one of their other more exciting younger batsmen.
And I also have to say, I don't know whether Gill is, he's not in form either, the opening bat. I think he has been disappointing. He hasn't built on the promise that he showed in Australia, which was a shame, really. But I have to say some other sort of general points. I thought, A, the match was played competitively.
Yep.
B, it was played in exceptionally good spirit. The ground fielding was top class. New Zealand nearly lost the match through a very, very simple catch dropped by Southey off Pant, who, as I say, went on to score 41, but fortunately he got him in the end. And Bumrah dropped a bad catch. Who he dropped escaped me, but he went on to get quite a few runs. But there wasn't a lot in it. It could easily have gone the other way had circumstances changed, and I think had India had the fourth seamer instead of Jadeja.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the scorecards, really that 21 from Jameson and the 30 from Southey were the difference between New Zealand taking a lead in the second half of the game and India taking a lead. And although in a low-scoring game, that difference
and when Jameson came to the wicket, New Zealand were on the back foot. And he changed the tenor of the innings. He was a more aggressive.
He was,
and then Southey carried it on. Did you know, incidentally, that Southey, as a percentage of his runs as a number 7 or 8, has more sixes, hit more sixes than any other player in Test cricket?
Yeah, that's pretty good going, isn't
it? Then.
Yeah. Yeah, all hail T20 cricket. That no doubt has helped him develop those skills as well.
Yeah.
But talking about Jameson, I think you're right. I mean, he was a worthy man of the match. His test record is fantastic, actually, with the ball and with the bat, for that matter. So he's got 46 wickets in eight matches, best bowling of 6 for 48, averaging just over 14, which obviously won't stay like that for his career, but is a brilliant place to start. Economy rate of 2.25 runs and over, so he's not expensive either. Taking a wicket every 37 balls, and already in 16 innings, he's got 5 wicket hauls and 1 4-wicket haul. So he's taken a major set of wickets every third innings. That's fantastic. And again with the bat as well, he's already got a Test 50. He's averaging, what's he averaging, in the 40s. Now again, that will go down. It was averaging in the 70s at one point, but he's got a first class average in the 20s, so you'd have thought that his batting average would drop in Test cricket over time, but nonetheless it's a fantastic start. And I have to say, the thing about him that delighted me more than anything else, Tony, was watching him walk back to his mark, and what came back to me was a vision of Angus Fraser.
Yes.
A very large, slightly shoulders forward fast bowler, looking like he'd just been told to muck out the pigsty or something, and he was stomping back to his mark. And you would have thought he just bowled an absolute pie that had disappeared for runs, but it didn't seem to matter what delivery he bowled. He still had that smack of Gus Fraser about him as he was getting ready to bowl, and I particularly enjoyed that as a Middlesex man watching that.
Well, you had to bring the old man Angus in, didn't you? Really?
Yeah.
But
One of the greats.
I think he's taller than Angus Fraser was. Or is, and I admired that, as I said slightly earlier. One of the big things I did admire was that in the main he kept the ball up to the batsman, which for a tall man is difficult to do. If you think of the like of Joel Garner and Curtly Ambrose, two similarly tall men, their ball was normally short of a length, rising at chin towards the chin. And they were very difficult to play. Jemison knew that was no good because Wagner was slamming them in and they were bouncing about waist high. So that wasn't the tactic, and he very soon copped onto that. There one other interesting thing that happened, which I've never seen happen before in a Test. Maybe you can correct me with your infinite knowledge of stats. But Watling dislocated his finger and had to go off the field, and so the sub came on to field. But the sub who came on was the reserve wicketkeeper and actually kept wicket. Now, I've never seen that happen in a Test where a sub has come on and kept wicket, and it made me think why England chose Billings to go into their squad, because had poor old Bracey, who everything else seemed to happen to in the Tests, had he injured himself, obviously Billings would have come on as a sub and kept wicket. I'm pretty sure it has. Now I've got a memory, and if anyone's watching, they might remember this, where it possibly shows my and your age compared to the people that are watching and listening to us, Tony. But I seem to remember after he retired, the great Bob Taylor, the great England wicketkeeper, was at a Test match, and the England wicketkeeper got injured, and he came on and kept wicket. As a substitute fielder after he'd retired. I seem to remember that. Maybe I'm making that up, but I'm sure I'm not. It wouldn't be me to make things up. But I have a memory certainly of something like that happening. He may not have fielded for very long, just for a short while, but yeah, I think it does happen occasionally, and it was interesting to happen. But again, Watling in his last Test match, obviously he's retired now from Test cricket. He would have wanted to finish the game. And he got the finger put back into place and came back out and kept wicket, which I thought was extraordinary.
Yeah. Just goes to show the determination to win the final. So a couple of kind of general questions. Then I want to talk about the kind of the two greats that played in the game, because I've done a bit of work comparing them. But just before we move on from the match, What would you say to those that said the weather spoilt that game, Tony?
It's a difficult one. I think the answer for me had to be yes, because I don't think we saw the batting side of the two teams in the best light, and it was constrained by the weather. The fact that they had the sense to put a sixth day saved it from being a farcical draw. But on reflection, I think yes, it marred the game. It didn't spoil it, but it marred it. It still was a good game of cricket and gave us a good finish. But I think that had the weather been better, we would have seen better batting, better scores, and just probably a more aesthetically finer game.
Yeah, it was a bit of a war of attrition, wasn't it? For a lot of the game, and yeah, certainly wasn't a T20 style game, that's for sure. But no, I mean, I know what you mean. I actually think what it did was it asked different questions, perhaps, that the two teams weren't expecting to be asked, conditions they weren't necessarily expecting to have to face, and I thought that added to the interest. But kind of as a supplementary question, I think Kohli has been quite quite open and said that he would have preferred a 3-match series to settle the World Test Championship, given that to get here, you have to play at least a 2-game series against the people you're playing in order for it to count towards the points table. And obviously a 2-game series is no good when you're looking to get an outright winner. But do you think for the future, given that I think we can say that the World Test Championship has been a success, I think a 3-match series would be.
I would agree with Kohli, because particularly in India, in England, in New Zealand, you are likely to get weather interventions, and I would hate to see the series decided because one side got an incredible rub of the green conditions wise, bowled the opposition out for 0.5, and the game would then be virtually over. And I do think that a 3-match series would give an opportunity for consistently the better team to be shown. So I would agree with Kohli. Yes, I do.
Yeah. I think so. I think it would be good to have a 3-match series.
It would be good. This was a good commercial start, considering everything that was against it, the COVID situation, the conditions, and that both teams were playing a long way from home. Although, to be fair, of course, the Indians would have a far greater support in the UK than would the New Zealanders.
Yeah. There were a few jolly New Zealanders in the crowd that managed to get in that made their presence felt. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I got a sense of that in the Indian reaction to the New Zealand victory as well, where they kind of said, look, well, congratulations, New Zealand, as you say, Tony. The game was played in good spirit, and I don't think anyone begrudges New Zealand a bit of a rub of the green after some of the bad luck they've had in recent years in the sharp end of tournaments. But I got a sense from Kohli and perhaps from some of the things that Ravi Shastri said as well, that their position was, we know how good we are. Yeah. We know what we've achieved in the last few years. We know what the level of this team is. And I think what they were saying is, New Zealand have won the Mason. Good luck to them. They've won the final game. But we still believe we're the best team in the world, and I think that's fair enough. And I understand that point of view. Not taking.
I think in any other conditions but those, India would probably have been favourites.
The
English conditions were the nearest conditions so that they would get in New Zealand. That was the reason I tipped them in the first place. I just felt that they would be more at home in the conditions, and India were coming in slightly colder, straight into cricket. Whereas New Zealand had 2 good competitive, and they were more finely tuned.
Yeah. So let's talk about the 2 great players in that game. Well, they didn't necessarily have the great contributions, though Williamson scored over 100 runs in the match, actually, which is in a low-scoring game is pretty good. Kohli versus Williamson. I did a bit of a look to see just how closely matched they were, and Max kindly put up a chart I pulled together, which just shows just how closely correlated these 2 guys' careers have been. So Kohli's played 155 Test innings. Kane Williamson's played 148. Kohli scored 7,547 runs. Kane 7.230. Kohli averages just over 52. Kane Williamson averages just under 54. That chart shows you the kind of average year on year, the cumulative average. Kane Williamson started playing Test cricket in 2010. Kohli, the lighter line there, in 2011. So as you can see how close and how matched their averages have been as their careers have developed. So just recently, in the last couple of years, I have to say, Kohli's had a fairly lean time in the COVID years. He averaged. Well, he averaged what did he average? 19 in 2020, and he's averaging just under 29 in 2021. And Williamson, remarkably, in 2020 averaged 83, and in 2021 he's averaging over 88. So in the last year or so, you can see that Williamson has just slightly pulled ahead with the darker line on the chart in his career average. But actually, there's nothing in it. If you look at that whole period, what seemed to happen is, about 5 or 6 years into their Test career, they both really took off. And for Kohli, that was what was that? That was in 2016, where he was averaging, he was doing really well, great. But then suddenly his average leapt from 44 to 50. Whereas for Kane Williamson, 2015, his average leapt from just under 42 to just a shade under 50. So they both had these big step ups, kind of about 5 years into their Test careers, which I think is really interesting, and I think tells selectors something too about perhaps having. Not that these guys were struggling before that, far from it, but I think it tells you something about sticking with when you've got really talented players and you stick with them. There'll come a point where they'll go supernova. And I think that's what happened to both of these guys there. I also had a look at how they played against some of the top teams, and indeed in the toughest places to play cricket. And again, Kohli does better than Kane in Australia. He averages 48 against Australia. Kane Williamson averages 41. Though I have to say, Kohli's played a lot more innings against Australia. He's played 36 compared to Williamson's 18. But in Australia, and this is quite interesting, Kohli averages over 50, averages 54. Whereas Williamson averages, again, pretty good, shade under 43. I wouldn't say no to an average of 43 in Australia, that's for sure. In England, though, this is quite interesting. So against England, Kohli averages 46, Kane Williamson's about 40. And again, Kohli's had 41 innings against England, and Kane Williamson's had 21 innings. So again,
but that's significant, I think, because it means that Kohli has scored better for longer. That's over the number of innings that Kohli has played both in Australia and in England, to average what he has averaged. He's played almost twice the innings, the number of innings as Kane Williamson has, and therefore, I think it shows up for Kohli to be, if you had to choose between them, to be the more consistent performer. And interesting, looking at your chart, Kohli parabola, or whatever you would call that thing, is almost constantly upwards all the way. Williamson had a severe dip for about 3 or 4 years before he started really to take off. Kohli started from humble beginnings and has gone on. I'm interested to think what you think of the two of them respectively as captains.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think they've obviously got very different styles of captaincy. Kohli's got obviously, quite aggressive. He's very much in command when he's on in the field. Lots of noise, lots of chat, and I think can and has occasionally lent towards perhaps being not always the sagest decision maker when he gets caught up in things. And I think sometimes I think it was in the T20 games where they were taking him off in the England tour of India and letting Rohit Sharma carry on, or somebody else take over the reins of captaincy towards the end of games when it was getting a bit tense. And I thought that was quite interesting. Whereas Williamson's kind of seems to be the opposite character. He's not like a big shouter and cajoler in the field. In this Test match was a good example of that. Usually, has a bit of a wry smile if something goes wrong. He doesn't seem to bawl his teammates out. He's he seems in control. But actually, I thought some of his field placing in this test was really, really excellent. And he seemed, again, and it's not, to some extent, it's not rocket science, but in the heat of the game, it can be lost. He seemed to have a plan for most of the Indian batsmen. He seemed to understand where they would score their runs. He rotated his bowlers very well, and I think was quite successful in getting wickets quite early on in bowlers' spells as well. Not every time, it wasn't that kind of test match, but he seemed to find a way and have a plan for each of the Indian batsmen. If not to stop them, if not to get them out quickly, then to make them then to stop them scoring and make them play in areas that they didn't want to play. And so yeah, all round, I think I would say Williams probably wins as a cerebral captain. But I think if you wanted a guy that was going to drag you by the scruff of the neck over the line,
yes,
I think Kohli is the man.
I think Kohli is the more aggressive and the more risk-taking captain, if you like.
Yeah.
Williamson, I think, is more dour and more safety first.
Mm-hmm.
What we would call the old-fashioned captain who would leave the opposition about 500 to score in 300 minutes, or something of that nature. Whereas Kohli, I think, would gamble's too strong a word, but he would risk a loss to try and get a win. The only thing I have against Kohli, and it comes from his passion, is that he does show his feelings a little bit. When Bumrah dropped a catch near the end of the match, he was distraught and showed it in a big way. Whereas, as you say, Williamson is more phlegmatic. But that just shows Kohli's enthusiasm, his desire to win, and probably his side know him, and in a way it would drive them on. I think if I had to choose for one of them to be a captain, I would choose Kohli, just because I like his positivity. I play a lot of chess. Williamson would be the better chess player. Kohli would play gambits in chess and try and win flashily. But no, I would go just for Kohli. But they're both magnificent cricketers, and well, we've said it before, Steve. The world is blessed with 4 top batsmen: Steve Smith, Kohli, Williamson, and our own Joe Root. And I think, to my mind, they're head and shoulders above anybody else in the world at the moment. I have a feeling that Pant may make a supreme name for himself. I just feel that man has got something about him that will count. But they're all fantastic cricketers.
Yeah. Well, certainly that's another conversation. Who's going to be the big 4 in 5 to 10 years' time? I would say Labuschagne's got a big shout in there. But I think the last thing I'd say about Kohli and Williamson, and this I found really interesting. Again, just goes to show how close they are in their own home conditions, where they're you expect them to be the ringmaster of the circus. Kohli averages 64. Williamson averages 65 in test innings at home. They've also actually got excellent averages in both the first and second innings of games. Kohli averages nearly 60 in the first innings, as in innings 1 or innings 2 of the game, and averages over 40 in the second innings. Whereas Williamson averages nearly 58, so it's a shade below Kohli in the first innings, but averages 48 in the second knock, which I think is fantastic. Wonderful. So 2 great players. I'm sure if there are any Indian fans watching us this evening, they will tell us that Kohli is still by far the better player. If there are any New Zealand fans watching, then maybe they'll have a quiet word on behalf of Kane Williamson. But I think the most important thing we've learned this evening is that Tony thinks he could beat both Williamson and Kohli at chess.
Yes,
so I'd like to see that one day.
Not a shadow of doubt.
Excellent stuff. So, yeah, brilliant. The World Test Championship was. There has been some other international cricket, and indeed there's some international cricket going on as we speak. England are playing Sri Lanka in a first of all T20s, and then some 50-over games as well. And I have to say, let's talk about the game that was completed yesterday. The first game, very comfortable victory for England in that game, Tony.
Yes. I felt that Sri Lanka were trying to find their feet. They have a way to go. They've been chopping and changing their squad for about the last 18 months, 2 years, trying to get a settled team. But there were several things I noticed, and actually it's come back to bite them in the second match. Their running between the wickets yesterday was appalling. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of times when they got one when they should have got two, and there were other times when they just played defensively and called no when they could have gone for a single, and singles upset fielding sides, quickly taken runs upset fielding sides. Mm-hmm. So the running between the wickets and their fielding, whilst okay, wasn't outstanding. Mm-hmm. And what I did notice is that the batsmen batted as if it was a test match. They didn't have raw power. And I mean, I don't know how many boundaries were scored this evening in their innings, but well into the 15th over, they'd only scored one boundary, I think.
So they scored, what did they score? They scored 10 boundaries last night.
Did they?
In the game yesterday, they scored 10 boundaries. And today, let me just have a quick look. How many did they score today? Well, they only scored 111 today in total. So they scored 6 boundaries today. It took until Mendes coming in at number 4 before they hit a boundary. Pereira, the captain, Kusal, batted for 25 balls without scoring a boundary. And none of their top 3 this evening went anywhere close to run a ball.
And after in the power play, the first 6 over power play, I don't think they averaged 5 runs and over. And I mean, the object of the power play is to enable the good batters to score runs and give a firm base for the score. So I think they're a little out of their depth. Surprisingly, they elected to bat first in both the matches so far. I heard Sangakkara interviewed, and he was trying to make a case for why they batted first. But I felt that if they wanted to make a game of it, their only hope was to surely try and constrict England and then score the runs. I mean, there was Wood tonight. Wood was bowling at well over 90 miles an hour, and at one time was on a hat trick. And then Rashid, I mean, he was bowling as if he was playing against Harrow or Eton or somebody in schools, because they were playing proper defensive shots to him, which he must have lapped up. They had to be more aggressive.
Well, yes, a very interesting point about the power play for Sri Lanka. So actually last night in the first game, they scored 39 runs. They were 39 for 2 at the end of the power play. So that at least they were going a run a ball. Tonight, they were 26 for 2 at the end of the power play. So they went going backwards in terms of that early scoring, and very difficult. Though I have to say, probably should mention, as it stands at the moment, England have got off to a very poor start, under 8 for 2.
Oh, they
2 for 8 if you're an Australian. There was so poor old Milan again. I was going to say my notes for the game yesterday said poor old Milan, because yet again he didn't get much of a go yesterday. He started, he scored at a rate of 3 and over, which plays into the hands of all of his critics, and got bowled as well. Whereas Butler was scoring runs for fun, Jason Roy was scoring runs for fun. Bairstow came in and knocked it about and finished it off.
Yes, but I feel for Milan. He has been a victim again of this rotation policy, which I complained about bitterly the other week. He's had, I think this was his first yesterday was his first white ball game, and he's had so little cricket. It's ridiculous. And I was also very surprised that Wokes, who has had equally little cricket and bowled pretty well yesterday, he was rested, or whatever you want to use the term, for tonight's match, and David Willey came in.
Well, I guess they're just trying to give the whole squad a game. I don't think Morgan's going to learn a lot about his regular players in this series. I I think, I mean, although it's easy to say when England are now 10 for 2, but in the first game, I would say as well, what I found interesting was the selection of Livingston, and Livingston being given a couple of overs at kind of second spinner role. Now, clearly, Livingston, as we've spoken about him a number of times on the show, we think he's really got something, and we always like to see Liam Livingston wearing the England colours because we think he's got a lot to offer. And indeed, I know Tony, you're a man who thinks he would be, if not at the moment, but could be somebody to look at for the Test team. Now, it's dead interesting. He actually bowled 2 overs yesterday and took 1 for 9, which is very good going. With spin bowling in T20, and today as well. I think he had a bowl earlier on as well. Let's have a look. I think he did too. If I was watching it earlier on, yeah. And again, he gave away none for 10. So again, he only went for 1 boundary in 2 overs today. So he's clearly doing everything that's being asked of him in terms of showing he can be that fill-in bowler. Again, captained well by Morgan, bowling at the right time.
It occurred to me, for instance, that if you had to choose between him and Lawrence, I would pick Livingstone every day, and I'm an Essex man and have a great deal of time for Lawrence. But to bowl Lawrence in a Test match is a positive insult, disgrace, call it what you like, that England would have to turn to him. Whereas if Livingstone was in the team, he would give you would then have a case for not picking Leach, although I wouldn't support it, but for not picking Leach if you had Livingstone and Root in the team, and the conditions were favouring seam bowlers, and you merely wanted to use the spinner occasionally, and Livingstone would fit that bill. He's also, of course, a magnificent fielder, as well as a very, very good bat who bats high up in the order for Lancashire. He's been talked up a lot. Bumble, David Lloyd, he thinks he's the bee's knees. But we'll see. My one question, if you like, is will he be given the chance? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but it's certainly good to see him doing the business when he's been given the opportunity. That won't do him any harm. I have to say, yesterday again, the top order looked good. They're not looking too clever today, but again, Morgan probably won't mind. I mean, they still only need 100 to win at this point.
I think yes, there's probably an understandable lack of concentration, which shouldn't happen. But I mean, when you've only got 110 or whatever it is, they've got to get to win. One other interesting thing came out of yesterday. They were talking generally. I didn't realise Rashid has not got a contract. You know that?
Really?
Yeah. I was very surprised at that, and I hope they remedy that. Yeah. Also, I noticed yesterday, just hiving off a little bit, that Stokes played for Durham in the shortened version. He scored 11 and bowled 3 overs, so he's on the way back. And of course, we all know what Stokes does to English Test team. He balances it. He is the key player, if you like, really.
He is, yeah. No, good. So tonight, I mean, I think that England will be looking to win the game, obviously. But if Morgan gets some runs, that won't hurt. If Billings and Livingston come in the middle order and score some runs, that's not going to hurt either. It only really needs one. It really only needs one. One person to have a fairly decent knock today. So let's see how the game goes on. 13 for 2 as I speak. Yeah, well, but maybe that will change in a minute.
Saturday is the first T20 with India, I think, isn't it? I think they will be more of a test than Sri Lanka, who are, I think, on a development mission. They're still trying to find their best team for the World Cup.
I think they are, and they're probably trying some people that may not make the final cut as well.
So, yes. Although, as was said there, you can tinker too much. You sometimes have to say to people, look, we're going to give you a run of a few matches then, and your place is secure no matter what you do, and try to give them confidence to play well that way. And maybe Sri Lanka are falling into the trap of chopping and changing their team too much.
A little, yeah.
They have got a very, very good spinner, I thought. Can't think of his name. It begins with H. And he bowled well yesterday, and he's a reasonably attacking bat. But other than that, they've a long way to go.
Is that Hasaranga?
Yes, yeah. Leg spinner.
Yeah.
And bowled with leggies at a good pace too.
Yeah, good. So good cricket as we speak at the moment. As I say, England will be looking to. They've just started to accelerate a little, I think. Consecutive fours from Morgan and Roy, either side of at the end of an over. So they're looking like they're not going to hang about. That won't take too long then, if they get going. But the other good game that I really enjoyed in the last week, Tony, since we were last speaking to folk on the Cricket Fan Show, was the England-India women's Test match, which I thought was a really good game, actually. Going into the final session, all three results were still potentially possible. I think the England bowlers didn't quite have enough on the last day. They didn't quite have enough. But I have to say, I thought India batted superbly on the last day of that Test match to save the game. It was a good game. I don't know if you caught much of it, Tony.
I caught a little bit of it. Two things struck me. One, what a good pitch it was, what a good wicket it was. And I think the game benefited enormously from that, because both sides were able to demonstrate their abilities with the bat, and you really had to work hard to get your wickets. And it was good to see the match going at the full limit of the game. And I think it just shows you what the benefit of a good wicket is. People talk about, we need to have a wicket that gets results. That is not that sort of implies that there's got to be a little bit of greenness in the English wickets, etc. Not so. If you're playing a 4 or a 5 day match, you should be able to get a result in that time if you have a good wicket. And a good wicket is what I would call in a 4 day match, for instance, one that bats well for 3 days and begins to give the bowlers some assistance at the end.
Yeah.
And similarly, in a 5 day good batting, certainly for 3.5 days, and then gradual deterioration, which brings the spinners in and that sort of thing. That way you get an all-round result. And I thought the women, they played well. They obviously enjoyed the match. The conditions were perfect for them. And all credit to India, who I thought were going to be swept away at one stage, but they fought back in the last.
They dug in. Yeah, they dug in.
Yeah, they got an easy draw in the end. Well, not an easy draw, but they got a comfortable draw.
Yeah. I particularly enjoyed watching Sophie Ecclestone bowl on the last day with a very attacking field with a silly point and a short leg and a couple of slips, and it was really good to see. I always enjoy that real kind of when a captain gives their spinner every chance of making a difference, and she was getting some turn. But the Indian batsmen, the Indian batters, I should say, did an excellent job of just watchfully, playing very carefully, putting away the bad ball, because a spinner will give you some runs every now and again. It was good. It was really good. I thought Heather Knight's captained it very well. I don't think there was much more she could have done. She wasn't getting a lot out of her pace attack, so she was really turning in the end to herself and to Ecclestone to try and to make the difference. And I think it was probably a feeling throughout that, if we can nip one more out, then it's a slightly less accomplished batter coming in. We might get 2, we might get 3, and
but the more the Indians scored runs as the last innings went on, the more confident they seemed to get, and so that the later batswomen, when they came in, came in with confidence. There have been discussions over the size of the ball. I would have to say I'm not in favour of a slightly smaller ball for the ladies. I think that the normal size cricket ball, there are like there are with men. There are ladies with larger hands and smaller hands, and I don't think once you start tinkering with the size of the ball, it reminds me of golf, where they've gone to ludicrous extremes with golf clubs, and I think that I would keep the same balls.
Yeah, I think it's the standard in women's international cricket is to use smaller balls, and I think one of the problems that some of the England bowlers mentioned after the game, and I don't think they were by any means were complaining, is that there's not a Duke's ball that fits the dimensions for the women's international cricket.
Oh, is there not?
I think they have to use a kookaburra. So again, as with all kookaburra balls, it doesn't offer the bowling the pace attack as much for as long. The Duke ball, obviously, I think is for my money is the better ball, and I think it should be used throughout the world. I think the Indians agree with that. Actually, I think they've certainly had some problems with the SG ball that they sometimes or have used in India, and as we all know, the kookaburra can get very soft very quickly and doesn't really help. Though Stark, Cummins, and Hazelwood seem to manage pretty well. But yeah, I think my final word on the England-India women's test match was more women's test matches, please. I really enjoyed it, and I think with the right support from broadcasters, and I think Sky, it was great that Sky showed the game in its entirety. I think we can get more people interested in watching women's test cricket.
And
very, very good for them.
Please keep up the standard of the test wickets.
Yeah.
I would hate to see women's test cricket spoiled by having to bat on very, very poor wickets, which wouldn't do anything for the good of the game or the skill of the players playing it.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. There are too few tests. I like myself the idea that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, whereby you could have a series which involved two tests, 250 overs and 220 T20s or something of that nature.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be really good, wouldn't it? I think Morgan's just gone as well. So there we are. Yeah. Morgan slaps it to backward point. If there was
Has Bairstow been in yet?
Yeah, Bairstow was bowled through the gate.
Yeah. So it must be Livingstone coming in then.
Livingston or Billings, I think, will be.
Oh yes.
Coming in. So there we go, Mac. I think we've covered all of the top class cricket there. The only game we haven't mentioned so far, I guess, is the West Indies South Africa Test match, which again was another good win for the South Africans. Keshav Maharaj taking a hat trick, which was obviously noteworthy. I think he's only the second South African Test bowler to take a hat trick. And again, a clear, comfortable win by South Africa in that test. The West Indies looked like they were getting a team together. Looked like they were finding some players. And I think before this series, I should say, I would have said it was South Africa that were looking like they didn't quite have all the pieces they needed for a good test team, but they've done very well so far and have been comfortably the better side. So I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more of South Africa and hoping the West Indies can find a bit more form with some of their new players like Mayers and De Silva and so on that they've brought into the team, who started off very brightly and looked like they were going to give West Indies a real platform and lots of support for the likes of Gabriel and for Holder and for Roach and so on. But so far, not the case.
One of the other interesting things I noticed, now he's been relieved of the captaincy of South Africa. Quinton de Kock seems to have found his form again.
Yeah,
I think
indeed.
he was one who was patently overburdened by keeping wicket, captaining, and opening the batsman.
Absolutely.
I think it was too much for him, and I think relieved of the pressures of captaincy, he's like a new man.
He is.
West Indies, I think they've got signs. They're a bit fragile in their batting. They need possibly one or two more solid batsmen at the top of the order. But their pace attack, there's nothing wrong with their pace attack. I think it's very good. I think they're of course, you don't know, they've always had this little, what should we say, contretemps between the islands authorities, which stopped them being maybe more of a team than they could be. But I think they're on the way back.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. It's good for world cricket if South Africa and West Indies are both strong and competitive.
Absolutely.
We've seen India are a good side. We saw last summer Pakistan have got a lot to offer. Australia, New Zealand, always good. When you've got all of those teams, Sri Lanka maybe not quite so strong at the moment, and Bangladesh maybe not either. And you've got Afghanistan coming along as well, an island with early promise and something to offer too. There's lots to enjoy in international cricket. But I want to call Matt back because I want to talk about the one scorecard that I saw at the weekend that I think is noteworthy. Where are you, Mac? Here he is.
I'm here.
So yeah, there was a club game. I don't know if you saw this, Tony, in England, where I think the one team had a bat and scored 269 runs, and then their opponents, the visitors, went into bat all out for 2. Nip and tuck, 267 run victory.
Indeed. As a little aside, Steve, I did see it, and I have a friend who is a very keen cricket follower and lives in the little village where the team that scored 2 plays in Buckton, which is a place near, well, relatively near Huntingdon and Bedford. So I was able to send him a little cutting and asking him where was he in their direst hour of need.
I think the absolute cherry on the top, of course, is that the runs were 1 wide and 1 leg by. I think the entire team scored 0. So what a shame.
So was that the bowling was good, or the players who were batting weren't really up to
I suspect the bowling was good, but I suspect once you find yourself 0 for 5, I would imagine panic and hysteria sets in the dressing room and in club cricket. When you imagine the pressure on the number 11 going out to bat in that game.
Yeah.
Just get a run. Just get a run. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, it was a bit like Bracey when he was going out to bat for England, and they were praying he got a run. It reminded me when I was at school many years ago. We used to play football, and the school I went to was very near Hackney Marshes. Mm-hmm. And in those days, Hackney Marshes was the breeding ground for all great footballers, for Tottenham Hotspur, Arsenal, West Ham, you name it. And we played this young team from Hackney Marshes who were 2 years younger than we were. We were 13, they were 11, and we were beaten 9-0 and lucky to get it. And we came afterwards, and the coach said, "Well, don't worry, lads. The return match is in 3 weeks' time. We'll make a few players and we'll do an awful lot better." We lost in the second match, so it just reminds me of that. Yeah.
Also, as well, there's been another viral video just before we move away from this. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know where it was played, but it was going around the internet where a player. This is again club or cricket, just some people playing, and a guy hit the ball for 6, but he hit it so well. It went through his own car windscreen. He smashed it into his own car.
Let me tell you
the guy's reaction when it happened. He literally pressed. Did you see it, Steve?
Yeah, I saw it. It's fantastic. It's a lovely shot. Swiveled pull over mid wicket and then straight into the need for autoglass. Yeah, but I'll just tell you then before we finish. Then my finest moment probably with a cricket bat was on the beach in India. Right. In the afternoon, as the sun just cooled a little, it was cricket time, and the local kids and the local chaps all came out, and we all played cricket on the beach. There was one fellow who was quite bossy with the kids, and he was setting the field, and he was telling them what to do, and he was moaning at them for their fielding and all that. And I had a bat, and this chap came on to bowl, and he was all mouth about it all, and I managed to straight leg put him over his own shop. Which was probably the best shot I've ever played in cricket. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, it was a great day. That was one of the best. It didn't end quite so well for me when I took a long diving catch and ended up with a face full of sand and had to be led away by the children so I could wash my face. That wasn't quite the hero that maybe I suggested. But anyway,
brilliant. Well done.
Brilliant stuff to talk about, but loads to talk about next week as well. Possibly talking about how England might lose chasing 111 because they're now 36 for 4. But we'll have plenty to talk about next week as well. Loads of good cricket still to come in the next few days.
Brilliant. And thank you, boys. That was brilliant. Thank you for letting us know what was going on with the cricket as well. All the wickets falling, unfortunately, for England. So, look, I'm sure we will do some live cricket, especially when the 100 starts, and get into it. But yeah, it was great to cover everything. Look, I think the India, New Zealand that you talked about, a lot of stuff, even with Virat Kohli defending himself. You talked about all that, and there's a great stat as well. If you missed that, have a look back at the video and leave some comments about the stat that Steve does. Let me tell you something. Steve is the Mr. Analytics. He's a human analytics machine, anybody watching. So this guy will produce anything and everything. So look, we've got to follow Steve. Does all the kind of updates there on SFTV_cricket, and follow him on Medium as well. He does some great bits and pieces there as well. But look, the analytics are amazing, fantastic. They take a certain mind to do it, and Steve's the man who's up to the job. That's why he's the cricket guy. So it's all good stuff. But yeah, thank you for covering that. And obviously England are on now, and we've talked about the World Test Championships and also the women's cricket. We shall cover that as well. As well as that, we'll cover lots more of stuff with women's football and cricket and whatever else in the next season. So it's going to be fantastic. And like the boys said, hopefully more women's cricket. And obviously, West Indies, South Africa, West Indies capitulating. So thank you for all that, boys. So look, there's going to be loads to cover next week. Loads of matches on. It's the summer. It's the time of cricket. So yeah, leave some comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us on Twitch. Obviously on YouTube as well, but mainly on Twitch. So sign up for more updates on what's going on. So thanks for Steve for everything, as always, the cricket guy.
Pleasure, Mac.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you, Tony, as well. You've been brilliant.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. And for the Cricket Fan Show, we're here every